Welcome into Mississippi State Live here on the Voice of College Football. Andrew Miller on a Thursday evening with you guys. Call-in show time. Anyone wants to come join the stream, you have the opportunity to do so. And as always, every single time I do, we have to stream to our Facebook page for Voice of College Football as well. And literally every time I've done it, it craps out on me at first and doesn't want to work for whatever reason. I'm not worried about that though. That's fine. We're rolling on YouTube, which is the bigger thing. Yeah, though, it's a call-in show, so it's an opportunity for you guys to come be a part of the stream. Give me your thoughts on the Bulldogs and sort of lead the conversation wherever you want the discussion to go. Also, a Q&A show. If anybody has questions you want answered, drop them in the chat. I put out a call for questions and didn't get much response. I did have a couple friends who sent me with some stuff that I'll get to later in the show, which, hey, that's fine. Just trying to give us various stuff to get into for this episode. But I do have a topic I wanted to hit as well. We're going to talk a little bit about men's basketball in the portal. And just a look at what their approach is going to have to be, and kind of some big picture talk for men's basketball, some stuff that I've been thinking for a while and trying to find the right episode to get into it. And I think this is an episode where it makes some sense, even though, yeah, we primarily talk football. It's smack dab in the middle of baseball season. And, we might have some thoughts there. Basketball portal season's heating up, and it's going to be a very, very, very important offseason for Chris Jans and the Bulldogs, and the type of talent that they have to be able to go out and land. So I have some thoughts on that we'll definitely get into on this episode. But yeah, appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and have the notifications turned on so you do know we do go live. And of course, tell all the friends and family you have in your life about what we're doing here at Mississippi State Live. Bring them to the channel, tell them to subscribe. And if they're wondering, wait, well, when do we go live? What time can I go and catch the show? You can catch the show Mondays at 6 p.m. Central Time and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central Time. Again, Mondays is our typical newsy type show, topic type show, whatever it may be, getting into all that various stuff. Thursdays, of course, we hit that stuff as well, but Thursdays is the call-in show. If any of you want to join the stream, you have the opportunity to do so. We have a link pinned to the top of the chat. Also have a link down in the description to the video. And we can just kind of talk about whatever. But also Thursday's Q&A shows. So anyone who doesn't want to call in but still has a question you want answered on the stream, drop it in. You can put it on I put a call out for post. I do a post on the YouTube page calling out for questions. You can respond there. You can @ me on Twitter. Or if you just want to put a question in the chat live as we go here, that is perfectly fine as well. You can leave one there. If you can't catch the show live and need to be able to listen on the go, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other wonderful podcasting platforms out there to check out Mississippi State Live, as well as all the other wonderful content from the Voice of College Football Network. You can find it in the podcast room. Sorry, I got a message as I was talking, so I was looking at what that is. And I'm not going to talk about what I'm getting messages about. Good Lord. All right. Let's see. So, like I said, call-in show, Q&A type show. If anybody wants to join the stream, you have the opportunity to do so. But I did have a couple questions that I thought I would hit from a couple friends who hit me up with some stuff. So this comes from my guy, Will. What is the most important game on the 2026 football schedule? And I think this is something that we've talked about some. And at some point, we will definitely do an episode breaking down. And this will be more like summer content, the most important games on the schedule. But I can kind of bury the lead as to what I would say is the number one for Mississippi State right off the jump. And to me, I put that as the Minnesota game in week 2. I think when you talk about a Mississippi State and what is the expectation in year 3 for Jeff Levy, it's bare minimum get to a bowl game. Year 3 obviously took over a major rebuild, obviously was going to take some time, and I don't think it's fair to say, well, look what Kurt Signetti did, look what X, Y, and Z coach at these different programs did, and say they were able to get whatever accomplished in year 1. Why couldn't you do the same? I don't think it's always fair to look at it that way. You have to understand that flipping a roster in one offseason is incredibly difficult to do unless you have the right pieces following you, frankly. And it was going to be a multi-year process for State, especially when you consider the schedule that they were going to be facing in 2024. It was going to be a tough year one regardless. It was tougher than we expected. Probably didn't have to be that difficult, but nonetheless. Last season, I think a lot of us were hoping, could you get to that bowl eligibility mark? And we're not counting, getting the APR invite to the Mayo Bowl. That's a little bit of a different circumstance. But, there was hope. Can you be a 6-win type team? And again, kind of talking about the schedule, it was like, it's going to be really difficult to do. You have a lot of teams in this game. Like, we talked about this State team could be genuinely better and only see a marginable improvement in the record. And it's one of those weird things where before the season, if you told everybody these are the results and what they're going to be, I think most everybody would take it. But then, of course, we see how the games actually played out, and you understand, what could have happened. Sorry, I'm getting a call from my pharmacy. I'll have to send that to voicemail. You understand what could have potentially happened for State from a you had the opportunity against Tennessee. You had the opportunities against Texas and Florida games you should have won. I've talked about the Tennessee games. Like, I don't put that as a game like State should have won that football game, but Florida, Tennessee certainly were games State needed to have won. Florida and Texas are games State should have been able to win. And the way you closed out the season, losing in the manner you did, that team should have been better. Team should have won more. But nonetheless, you win the 5 games. It was still a big improvement from where you were the previous season. Now you go into 2026, and at a bare minimum, okay, you've got to be a bowl team. You have to take that next step forward, be a team that can get to the postseason. It's really not a question. And I know this is a big preamble getting into the answer for Minnesota, but you look at what awaits Mississippi State on the schedule this year. And right off the jump, you are going to a 9-game SEC schedule. Now, you're getting 5 of those games at home, but 3 of those home games you're getting in Starkville against SEC opponents are Alabama, which I don't expect to win there, although Brandon Marcello seems to think Mississippi State's going to pull the upset, so maybe. You've got Oklahoma mixed in there. That's a very difficult team to face. I think the Sooners are going to be pretty good. Now, the other 3, Missouri, Auburn, Vanderbilt, all games you could potentially win. But talk about the road schedule as well for State. You got to go to Austin. You have to go to Baton Rouge. You have to go to Oxford. I'm not picking State in any of those games. I'm frankly not picking those games to be close. At South Carolina, you have a chance. So as we break it down in a 9-game SEC schedule, there's 4 SEC games I think State has a decent shot at winning, barring any kind of crazy upsets along the way. You have 2 non-conference games between ULM and then the FCS game where it's like, okay, you're going to win those games. Minnesota's kind of the wild card in there in week 2, going on the road against a power conference opponent. And if you're talking about being able to find 6 wins, State really doesn't have a choice. They kind of have to go up to Minneapolis and get that win, which I think is going to be easier said than done. Minnesota is a team under PJ Fleck that has kind of been perennially underrated. They've been really solid year after year as a bowl team, winning that 7-8 games a season. And this is a team this year that's going to have a lot of talent back, and at least a lot of experience. Their top defensive linemen are coming back. I believe one of their top linebackers, they got a few of the top guys back in the secondary, are losing a few good players. Like they have a safety that got poached by Oregon. But on the offensive side of the ball, their top tailback, their starting quarterback, offensive line, they're bringing back their best players, kind of overturning the receiver room, but do have one of the guys who's a part of the rotation. But they kind of have their core there in place to be a really solid team. That's going to be a difficult game in week 2 for State. It's certainly not a game that you would just give State a very high probability of winning. Now, the counter argument to that is you look at Mississippi State against Arizona State the last 2 years. You You could have won in Tempe 2 seasons ago with a 2-win team. You won in Starkville this past year with a 5-win team, despite Arizona State overall being better. And I heard somebody mention Minnesota has struggled in non-conference games against power conference teams. I am very curious what what it's looked like for them typically in those games. Just kind of rolling through. I mean, look, last year they go on the road to Cal and lost that game. And that was not a great Cal team. That was a bowl team, but it was a road game. 2024, I believe they opened the season against North Carolina. I think they got a win in that one. No, they lost at home to North Carolina last year, 2 years ago when the Tar Heels were. This is the year before Belichick. Again, it was a bowl team. It was Mac Brown's last season. What did they do in 2023? That's the wrong thing. Did they have a non-conference power game? I don't think they. No, they went to North Carolina and lost. That was a ranked UNC team. I know this is not great podcasting. I'm just kind of rolling through here. Under PJ Fleck, how have they performed in these type of games? Did get a win over Colorado. That was a bad Colorado team in 2022. So, okay, look, they've not done well lately against some of these power conference opponents in the non-conference. That is a thing worth pointing out outside of, again, when Colorado was really, really awful. So maybe that's something to point to as a positive for Mississippi State, where you think they could be able to get something done. But regardless, it's a road trip against a really solid team, and a win is certainly not a guarantee for State. But if you're talking about going to a bowl game, I think you kind of have to win that game. I think the chance of Mississippi State winning greater than 3 SEC games is incredibly slim. Again, like I said, you're facing 5 teams in the SEC between Alabama, LSU, Texas, Oklahoma, Ole Miss that I think are all going to be much better than you. Touchdown plus underdogs in each of those games, if not 10-plus point underdogs in those games. Your odds there are very slim. You have to take advantage with Missouri, South Carolina, Auburn at home, and then potentially at South Carolina week 3. But that involves, you really need to go perfect in the non-con. That was one of the differences with the 8-game SEC schedule, is that even once State added the power conference game, you could occasionally get away with losing that because, getting 3 wins in the non-con plus 3 wins in SEC play was not undoable. You could still find a way to path to 6-6. It's gotten much more difficult now. So and I just also think from a momentum standpoint, playing that game the week before you have to go to Columbia, if you're coming off a loss and now you got a road trip against a South Carolina team that could have a wide range of outcomes this season, very difficult place to play, that would be tough. But if you go and get a win in Minneapolis, you're 2-0. Now we're going to South Carolina hey, can this be a 3-0 start? Which I know they did it this past year. It didn't really matter. But it's a big opportunity to get some momentum early in the season and build your way towards a bowl team. So being a bowl team. So I would absolutely say South Carolina, at Minnesota, to me, that's the game that sort of defines the season for State. Next question that I had, and this is from my guy Reese, and this is more of a discussion type question, although, look, let's be honest, I just turned that into a discussion question right there talking about Minnesota. But I'm fully capable of making anything a long conversation. Create an all-state team using position groups, but you cannot use the same year twice. For example, you could use the 2021 receivers, the 2015 DAC, and 2018 running backs, etc. O-line, D-line, linebacker, corner, safety would all be groups. So what he's saying here is we're going to fill out each position based on what a position room was at Mississippi State in a given year. But if once you take that, you can't you can't change it out. I'm going to cheat and do within since 2010 is the frame that I'm going to go with here to make it a little bit more modern. This might be a fun project to do down the line because I know you can go back in the 90s and get Smoot and Bean at corner or whatever, but I'll keep this modern for now. Also, some running back rooms there that would have been really good at various points in MSU history. I mean, look, quarterback is easy. You take the 2015 quarterback room, Obviously, you get a senior year Dak Prescott, that's one of the frustrating things being a Mississippi State fan has been whenever you do stuff like build an all-time state team, you can't make a case for any other quarterback. Like, I feel like every other program in the country, you can make a case. Like, it's probably not true every other program, but most other programs, you could make a case for at least 2 or 3 quarterbacks and have that argument. For state. You take Dak because nobody else is close. Hopefully, Camario changes that. That's what we're hoping for. But you take that 2015 room. You also have Nick Fitzgerald in there, and we see the player that he ended up being a really good college quarterback, a young Elijah Staley as well. Remember Dan Mullen said he was like Cam Newton, but you take 2015 quarterback for sure. Running back, I mean, I could go. There's a couple years I could go here. I mean, I think Ballard and Perkins is pretty dang good. I'll go 2011 running back room. I know I could have also said that for 2010, but I might use 2010 for another group. Receivers, I've already used 2015, but I think I might take 20. Reese kind of left me the answers here. I would go 2021. You have, say what you will about him, Malik Heath has gone on to be an NFL player. Ra Thomas, say what you will about him, ended up being a really good player. Tulu was a good player. Mekhi Polk had a great season. Was Caleb Ducking? I guess Caleb Ducking was there, but he didn't really play much because it was Polk ahead of him. But Jaden Wally. So that was a very good group of receivers. Obviously, this past year with Brennan and Ant, I could have made a case there. That's about as good of a one. That's probably the best 1-2 punch State has had, at least in recent years. But in terms of top to bottom receiver room, like I think that group that year State probably had a few receivers who could have had similar type production as to what you had this year, had you just sort of force fed them all the ball. So I'll go 2021 receivers. Tight end, God. The tight end is tough, especially if I'm just picking in this era. I'll go. No, I can't go that year because. Well, no, I can't go that year. Dang it! I'm thinking I'm all over the place, trying to figure out how I can do this. I don't know. I might have to come back to tight end and figure that out in a sec. Honestly, but he couldn't block. I was going to make a case, just put Sadu in there as another receiving threat, but I would prefer to have somebody who could block a little bit too. Okay. Offensive line, couple ways I could go here. I think I'll go 2010. That was a good group. You had Gabe Jackson, Derek Sherrod. Very talented, very good offensive line. So I'll take the 2010 offensive line. Defensive line, 2018. There's other years that were obviously very good. You know, you could have made a case for either Fletcher Cox or Chris Jones. Having Jeff Simmons and Montez Sweat is too easy. So I've got to take 2018 defensive line. Linebacker, 2023. Yeah, give me Jet and Buki there. 14 with BMAC is really good, but I mean, Jed and Buki are so freaking awesome, so I'm going to take those two. Corner, I'll go 2012. That's where because you get a Thorpe Award winner in Banks, plus you get Darius Slay. Could have made a case for Emerson and Forbes, but I didn't. The problem there is I would have had to have done 2020. Like they played together in 2020, but that they were still kind of growing, and then I already used 2021 for receiver. Safety, I'll go 20. Let's go 2013 for safety. Nico Whitley back there. Was Kendrick Market hurt that year? But Jay Hughes, you had some good safeties, and Nico was awesome, so I'll take 2013 for that. Back to tight end. I don't think I've used 2014 for anything. Malcolm Johnson was a pretty good tight end for State, so I'll take 2014. So running through it, 2015 quarterbacks, quarterbacks 2015, running back 2011, receivers 2021, tight end 2014, offensive line 2010, D-line 2018, linebacker 2023, corner 2012, safety 2013, and then specialist 2024 or 2025, Kyle Ferry, Ethan Pulliam. That's probably not right, but State's kicking has been all over the place. 2017, honestly. Yeah, no, 2017. Jace Christman, and then Jace Christman for Heisman, shout out. And then they still had – was Logan Cook still on 2017? I think he was. So, yeah, that would be the answer there. So those are going like since 2010. Those are my state teams that I would take. So those are the two questions I have, and those are two questions I was able to ramble on for quite some time. So that's beneficial. As I'm making a noise while drinking, that's lovely. Real quick, do want to take an opportunity to tell you guys about the outstanding merchandise we have the Voice of College Football store. A lot of, I can't remember, was I just sharing my screen wrong? I don't know. A lot of great hats, shirts. Just the one that's got that maroon, if you want to rep the Mississippi State brand while also repping Voice of College Football. Polo, sweatshirt, all the great drinkware. And we do have various teams represented as well. Several SEC teams. No Mississippi State yet, but we hope to get there someday. But you can find a great gift for the rival fan in your life while also repping the Voice of College Football brand. So be sure to check out the merch store through the Voice of College Football. Next thing I want to get into tonight, and this is kind of again, it's a call-in show, so if at any point somebody wants to come join the stream, you got an opportunity to. Just use the link in the chat or in the description of the video. Talk a little bit about the portal for men's basketball. Mostly quiet to this point for State, not from a departure standpoint. You've had several players announce their intentions on moving on, but just one commitment so far. We talked about the commitment back on Monday. R.J. Johnson coming over from Kennesaw State, a 6'2" guard last year. 14.5 points per game, 3 boards, 4 assists while shooting 45% from the floor, 42% from three. Was a first-team All-Conference USA player. Was the MVP of the CUSA tournament. Had a good game in the NCAA tournament against Gonzaga. Had a good game early in the season against Alabama. Really solid player. A good pickup for Mississippi State to start off. A 4-star transfer, according to 247 Sports. It's a good start. A guy who can play alongside Hubbard there in the backcourt. Assuming Hubbard's going to be there. The rumors are that it's going to be the thing we've seen the past couple of years, that he will say that, he's going to declare for the draft, but, stay eligible and give the option to return, go through the process, and then we'll see what goes from there. You'd expect Josh Hubbard's going to be a Bulldog, though, next season, in all likelihood. We still haven't had any sort of announcement just yet. They've had a few guys visit. We talked about Middle Tennessee forward Torrey Alston, who took a visit. Who was a solid player for the Blue Raiders. He just took a visit to VCU. I believe NC State's the other team in the mix there. So that's a guy State's looking at. Really nice player that's got a bunch of teams very interested in him. Just took a visit to State on Wednesday. Shane Blakeney, a guard from Drexel, 6'5". He last year scored 14.2 points, 5.1 boards. Solid shooting numbers. Was not lights out, but still, 14-5, you'll take that. And was an all-defensive team within his conference. So I'm a guy who can play some defense, and a guy who can play some defense in your backcourt, something you would certainly want. Look, the State's got a few other targets that have come up. Kendall Sanders from Utah is a forward, 6'8". This past year, 5.2 points, 3.1 boards. I believe he's coming off the bench, but shot well from three, better than 40% from three in the opportunities he had there. Kennard Davis at wing, 6'6", from BYU, was a starter for the Cougars this past year for a really good team. Averaged 8.5 points per game. Was at Southern Illinois the couple years before that, where he was like a 16-point-a-game shooter. And there's some other names that have been floated around there, guys who are showing interest in State. But those are kind of the big names we've heard thus far. It's overall a little bit quiet, though, compared to where we've been previously. State's got a lot of work to do in the portal for men's basketball. And a lot of that also comes down to the players that they lost. And, the big positive was you retained King Grace. a guy who obviously was a really good signee for you going into last year, got his opportunities this year coming off the bench and had a few really nice games, showed some nice flashes, a guy that you think can really develop into a high-level player for State. And he was a part of a trio of young players that I think a lot of you would have liked to have kept between Jamarian Davis-Fleming in the front court and then Sergey Masura at wing as guys. I guess he really plays more of a four. So another front court player. Guys that I think you would have liked to have seen return. Now, Serge, people had mixed opinions on him. But, I thought showed really good athleticism. I think the ceiling is there, just needs development, needs to kind of work on his skill set. But was a good rebounder, again, and has a really high athletic ceiling. Hits the portal, he's going to UCLA. So you have a very good program under Mick Cronin that just picked him up. Jamarian Davis-Fleming, when he hit the portal, it got reported like, hey, there's opportunity for him to come back to State. And that's a guy that made some starts for you, played a bigger role as a true freshman than anyone was expecting, was a good rebounder, was a good defender. I think he lead the team in blocks or was close to it. Was not always the guy as a scorer, but still showed a lot of potential. Hits the portal, weren't able to hold on to him. He is going to Tuscaloosa. So that's a guy that you're going to have to see at least twice a year for the – I can't say for the future, at least for this next season. And we'll see what type of role he has with the Crimson Tide. But that significant loss. Of the two, definitely Jamar's the guy that you would have liked to have held on to from this potential that was there. I personally would have liked to have kept Serge and continue trying to develop him, even if he never became a stud. I think that's a guy who can give you good minutes. But those are two players you've lost now off to really good power conference programs that have hit the portal. Two losses I don't think you would have liked to have had. And it's put more pressure on what you're going to do with this portal class. And you look at what are the needs for State. Obviously, you have to start with what you have coming back. In terms of contributors, the only guys returning are Josh Hubbard and King Grace. Basically, everybody else that played a role on this team is gone. It has hit the portal or is out of eligibility. Now, you do have a couple young signees that have some potential. T. Bartlett at center was obviously a huge get for State last year, but had to take a red shirt as a freshman, kind of get his body right. Cameron Paul was another freshman at forward that there was some excitement around. It was a good 4-star signee for State. I think he had to take a red shirt for medical reasons this year. I believe he could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he had a deal. He was going to have to sit out the year. But there's young potential there. But those are two guys who haven't seen the floor yet. And then you have another exciting class coming in. Tristan Reed as a highly rated 4-star center was a big get for State. Jalen Collingwood at forward, another 4-star. Willie Burnett at guard, another 4-star. State signed a great class. The high school classes the last 2 years have been very impressive for Mississippi State. And you're going to probably be relying on some of those guys, I would expect this year. Reed especially is someone that there's going to be an opportunity for him because State kind of needs it. Especially now that you've lost Jamar, you look at what you have in terms of guys who could play center for you. Guy Chol will be back healthy. And look, I'm not trying to just crap on Guy Chol. Just from what we've seen of him from this point, Chris Jans seemed really excited about him for what it's worth before we found out he was going to have a season-ending surgery back last offseason. So perhaps he's progressed in a way that they feel like he's a guy who could play a big role for them. But you're talking about Chol, who just has not yet proven that can be a dude. T. Bartlett, who has a very high ceiling, but felt like was going to need some development there. And then now you have a true freshman in Tristan Reed. That's it for you. I think even if Jamar was back, you kind of felt like you probably need to go get somebody who's a little bit more on the veteran end. But once you lose Jamar, who was, again, going to be in line to be your starter, you don't have an option. You've got to go out. And I think that's probably the biggest priority for this team. They need a proven name at center, a guy who can step in and play that role. And it can't be what just happened this past year, right? Where you thought you got that guy in Quincy Ballard and it ended up being a total flop. But they've got to find a dude who can play there. And look, I don't care. Frankly, I don't care. Well, I was going to say I don't care about getting big-time offensive contribution, but frankly, I feel the way Chris Jans' teams play, you need a center who can give you something. I feel like you need to have a guy down low that you can get the ball to and trust him to be able to give you double-digit scoring. I could be wrong, but I feel like that's what best suits what they're going to do. Especially when you talk about the attention that's going to get put on Hubbard, even if you put other guys in the backcourt. With the attention that's going to be put on Hubbard, you really need to be able to have the threat to get the ball down low, and like teams have to worry about that, which was not a concern at all for teams this season. At least teams had to worry about it some last year with Murphy, and then when he was in the game, Nwoko could go get buckets. You know, he would only play 15 minutes, but when he was in the game, he was pretty effective. They need to find somebody who can play that type of a role. I think that is the biggest priority in this portal class. But you also need a guy at forward. I mean, like to play the four. You know, what do you have there? Again, it's a couple signees. You know, Collingwood may be a little bit too small for that. You know, maybe Cameron Paul last year, but you don't have a ton of great options there as a front court player. Like, they need a guy who could step in, and that needs to – I want that to be a guy who's playing great defense over everything else. I want outstanding defense from that spot. But that's a huge hole. You know, you need guys at the wing. And, you know, King Grace can kind of play that a little bit for you. They're obviously looking at some guys in the portal for that. You have a couple guys coming in as freshmen who could maybe contribute there, or a guy coming in as a freshman who could potentially contribute there, or a redshirt freshman for that matter. But what does State have at the wing? They don't really have anything. I would love for them to get a 3-and-D type guy there, someone that you can trust to be kind of a knockdown shooter, and then I want to have that length where he's going to rebound. I mean, I'm looking for like DJ Jeffries was really at his best when he played as a slasher, but when Jeffries had those games where he would start hitting from downtown, like that was when he was at his best because you were getting the 3-and-D from him because he played great defense. He rebounded well. But can you get a guy like that to step in and shoot the ball? State doesn't really have anybody. And then, you know, I would say even with getting R.J. Johnson to go with Hubbard and King Grace back, I mean, I think you want somebody in that front court in the back court who's going to be a high-level defender. You've been missing that. You know, Jabir McGee was an okay defender this past year, but having guys like a Rams Davis, a Shaq Moore, like you had previously, to really defend things out front. I mean, frankly, last year, the guy who was doing it a lot for you, I mean, I say last year was the year before, like Cam Matthews was doing that a lot for you, like defending the point frequently for State, because you just didn't have another great option out there. You want someone who can handle that. They got a lot of spots to fill because, I mean, again, you talk about right now between what's committed in the portal with R.J. Johnson, Hubbard and Grace coming back. You have 3 guys that you expect to be contributors that you've seen play college basketball or, you know, a lot of college basketball. Then you have 6 players between the other returnees and then the incoming freshman class. You haven't shown anything to rely on them. So, like 9 total players on the roster and only a third of them can you really count on? You got holes to fill. And you got to go out and land some really good pieces to step in. You have to land impact transfers. And I've thought about this a lot as to how pivotal this portal class is for Chris Jans. And, you know, we can go back to, I guess it would have been January when the Jordan Seaton stuff happened. And we talked about the money State had for that player, and just it didn't work out in the end. And football still looking to add a couple pieces here during the summer to kind of fill out their roster, including an offensive lineman from Mercer supposed to be taking a visit. But, you know, we kind of talked about a bit. That's a lot of money that, you know, in theory was supposed to go to the football roster that is not being used. You know, we don't know that for sure. And this is before basketball completely fell apart. But I said it a while back, and I've mentioned it here on the show. Like, whatever money you were going to go spend on Jordan Seaton, I would say go get 2-3 really talented players to come in. I think State needs to go out and get some truly high-profile transfers. And I don't like doing this whole thing of, I need a guy who played power conference ball, even for football, where people talk about it. But, for football, I at least understand at a lot of positions the physicality is such a big deal that a guy who has not yet proven he can play at that level, or that he has the body type and the physicality to compete at that level, trusting him to step in and do it within the SEC is difficult to do. Basketball is a little different. Guys move up all the time and are very effective because we see lower level mid-major teams are able to get wins constantly. I don't think taking mid-major transfers is a problem. And if it's a kid that every program wants, sure. But we also know in the portal, especially for basketball, there's dudes who hit the portal every single year from high-level programs, tournament teams. Starters for tournament teams will go and hit the portal in search of a bag. And I think Mississippi State needs to go and try to get some of those guys. And I think Mississippi State needs to go spend whatever it takes to go get some of those guys. And you have to go and put a roster together. And what is the reason for that? You can't waste this coming year for this, simply put, because Josh Hubbard, it's going to be it. This has to be an all-in type year for Bulldog basketball in my mind. You have a generational type talent that has been on your campus now for 3 seasons. And in those 3 years, you have 2 tournament appearances, 0 tournament wins. You haven't won more than 21 games, and you've had a losing conference record both years. Now, or you've had a losing conference record all 3 years. Now, the regular season stuff kind of is what it is, but you don't have a postseason run to show for it. And even as I say that, as the regular season stuff kind of is what it is, there's a lot of State fans. Look, 2004 is well before my time. I was alive, but I was 6 when the 2004 Bulldogs happened. That team didn't make it past the second round of the tournament, which is very disappointing for as talented as they were. But I guarantee you Mississippi State fans all look back on 2004 as an incredibly fun season because of the regular season and all the wins you had. Like, regular season results do matter in college basketball. Putting yourself in the upper echelon of the SEC does matter in college basketball. You haven't had a season like that, all while having a player of Josh Hubbard's caliber. And when you have a guy like Hubbard on the roster, it's not a case of, all right, well, this gives us an opportunity to just kind of, like, this guy takes care of some of our deficiencies elsewhere and we could be a solid team. Like, no, when you have a player like that on your roster, like, the goal should be we have to go put elite talent around him so we can be as good as we possibly can. Like, this is having Josh Hubbard opens a window for us to win at a higher level than we typically could. Mississippi State can contend for NCAA tournament berths without having a player as good as Josh Hubbard. But having Josh Hubbard gives Mississippi State an opportunity to ascend within the SEC. And they have failed to do that in all 3 seasons they've had him. And, of course, this past year was incredibly pathetic, which puts even more pressure on you. Hey, this is it. Like, you already are going to have immense pressure of, this is senior year Josh Hubbard. This needs to be like taking it. You have to take advantage of that. You have to capitalize. Knowing the season you're coming off of, it makes it an even bigger deal. And that's a ton of pressure on Jans. We've talked some about, expectations for men's basketball and, the hot seat discussion with Chris Jans and all that kind of stuff. And, I've gone back and forth on this. There are a lot of people who wanted to move on this year. I think Chris Jans earned the opportunity to have another season, try to correct it. But, you can't have multiple down years in a row. However, I don't think it's as simple as we'll just improve next year. I think historically for Mississippi State basketball, if you looked at the tenure Chris Jans has had to this point, his first 3 seasons being tournament teams, 20 wins. If you had that was your first 3 years, then year 4 happens the way it did. If in then year 5, he got back to being like a 17, 18 win type team, they go to the NIT. Historically, you would say, all right, you had a down year, you built out of it. We're good with that. And, we need to go back to the tournament this coming year, but we can see a year 6. I don't think that's going to suffice. Obviously, a losing season or a 500 year, that's a separate conversation. But let's say Mississippi State is just incredibly mediocre this coming year in basketball and misses the tournament. They're a postseason team, go to or they would qualify for the NIT or whatever, the Crown tournament, all the stupid stuff that nobody cares about anymore. Would you be good with Chris Jans coming back? And I don't know that I would because of the circumstances of this team. And I'm not letting this past year cloud my judgment too much. If you're telling me you can't, in Josh Hubbard's senior season, put an incredible team around him, I then would have a hard time feeling good about moving forward. And that's not me saying you've got to be a team that's top half of the SEC, wins 23, 24 plus games, makes a deep tournament run. No. If you got to the tournament, he's going to be back. Even if they go to the tournament as the last team in the field and they go one and done once again, he would still be around. I would think you still wasted it. I would still look back feeling you wasted the Josh Hubbard tenure, but I think Mississippi State would not be making a change. I wouldn't feel good about the direction of the program. I don't think State would be making a change. But I think to me, it has to be a tournament team next year if you're going to talk about bringing them back. And really, though, you need to capitalize to the point of you need to put a great team on the floor. You cannot have a player the caliber of Hubbard come through this program and not take advantage of that. Simple. He is one of the greatest Bulldogs of all time. Is going to have an opportunity to be the all-time leading scorer at the program. I don't know how far off he is. Maybe it would be a little bit too much to catch. I guess it would be Howell who's leading. But you are an all-time player in school history. You have to take advantage of having that guy on the roster and win as much as possible. And if that means you got to go crazy in the portal, you just have to do it. And look, I know he's slowly started building up the high school talent. This past year signing class was very good. This coming in signing class, very good. And ultimately, you did lose one guy in Jamarian Davis-Fleming, and that's a loss that stings because now he's going to Bama. But you hit on King Grace. We'll see what happens with Bartlett and Paul. We'll see what happens with this incoming group. Hopefully some of those guys step up and are immediate contributors. But I also think you need to go out and get some guys out of the portal. And RJ Johnson's a good start. You got to get proven studs in the portal and guys that are going to come in and fill roles. And if that means you got to go crazy from a spending standpoint, and we're working under the assumption Mississippi State's got the money to do it. Lord knows I'm not about to suggest Mississippi State is not in a place NIL-wise within the SEC to spend, because I get yelled at on Twitter when I've done that. Which, again, that wasn't me saying Mississippi State just doesn't have the money. It was more I think they have the money to be a good team. What are you fighting up against within the SEC? I don't care how you have to do it this year. You find the money to spend. You find the money to spend and go and put an incredible team on the floor. That's got to be what you do. And if you can't do that, then you start contemplating changes. And you probably have to make a type of change. And I still think Chris Jans is a very good coach. This year does not make me think he's just completely incapable of building a good team. I think, look, they went all into the portal. They swung and missed. And it is what it is. But he's going to have to be more successful in the portal than he's been to this point. I mean, I'll say that. Even 2 years ago, that portal class that came in that was like a top 20 ranked portal class in the country, a lot of 4-star signees. Those guys ended up being fine players. But ultimately, why did that team go to the tournament? It was because of Hubbard and Cam Matthews and the Keyshawn Murphy, guys who were already on the roster. If you had lost, honestly, especially if Mook was gone, but then Murph as well, and it was just Hubbard and those other transfers, they're probably an NIT type team that year. Because all those other players you brought in, like Kanye Clary didn't play. Kugel was just super up and down and was pouting half the time. Nwoko would get gassed after 15 minutes. Melendez, was kind of all over the place, had a few good games early, and then for much of SEC play just was not all that great. Famina did nothing for you. Like, that portal class was fine. You produced a bunch of role players. You got away with it because the guys you had on the roster coming back ended up being really good. This year's portal class, you signed guys who weren't even role players. And with everything else you had lost on the roster, you were screwed. It's got to be a true portal haul. Like, they're going to have to do a better job than they've done each of the last 2 years to make this work. But if they don't, then I think you're talking about changes. Mike Suddeth in the chat, losing Jamarian was huge. He was the only good big, and a chore left, so I don't know. I don't really care about a chore. No offense to him. That is what it is. Jamarian was the only big you had on the roster that showed true major upside. I think Surge, because I'm counting him in that group, I know he couldn't play a center, but he could play at the 4. Showed enough flashes that I would have liked to have continued seeing the development there. But it's not the end of the world. But losing Jamar is tough because if he what he showed as a freshman suggests that if he takes another step forward, he's going to be a really good player. Like, he's probably looking at being a starting caliber center within the SEC with a ceiling to be an upper tier center within the SEC. And the thing is, with those 2 losses, I forgot to say this earlier when we were talking about that. I don't know that either of them are true back-breaking losses. And this is not me trying to undersell it as a State fan. And these are guys that I said you really wanted to hold on to, but now that they've lost, I'm like, oh, it's not a big deal. No, it's a big deal. But look, if you're purely judging off what they did this past season and you're only going off projection, could State go out and sign a 4 and a 5 who could give you more than what those 2 guys were going to give you? It's possible. We don't know. I think you'll almost certainly, unless you just crap the bed in the portal again, you'll bring in guys who are better than what they were this past year. But being better than this past year is not the standard. Being better than this past year is an incredibly low bar to clear. If both those guys go on and are successful at their new stops, and as Micah Chimney is going to be good at Bama, like he probably will be. If Jamar's a great player at Bama, if Surge taps into his potential at UCLA, and both those guys left, and then the guys you bring in just don't pan out or just are kind of okay, that's going to sting a lot. There is a lot of pressure to get this figured out. And again, I like Jans a lot. I still think he's a good coach. I still think you have to take the historical context of what he's accomplished to this point into consideration and understand that he has mostly done a very good job. But when you have a player like Josh Hubbard on the roster, the pressure mounts even higher. And if you don't get figured out for his last year, you're in trouble. I don't think you can move forward at that. We'll see, though. Again, State's in talks with various players in the portal. No super huge names to this point. I mean, the kid out of Drexel, Shane Blakeney, seems to be a hot commodity right now. Mike is saying Jans is a good coach when he has guys on the team playing. That's fair, yeah. Blakeney out of Drexel seems to be a hot commodity. A lot of programs want him. Some of these other guys we'll kind of see. You're kind of banking on potential more than anything else. Johnson was a good start, but I think they need to go and find some true. They got to win some battles for some guys that you are highly confident going to be a high level player. I think that's kind of what you have to do moving forward. So we'll see if there's any more portal news for men's basketball. I mean, that'll about do it for me. I'm not going to go deep into baseball previewing the series at South Carolina. I just don't think what needs to be said other than State has to go and win the series. They really need a sweep. This is do or die time for Bulldog baseball. Either you go up to Columbia and you handle business and you get some momentum and you look more like the team that we expected you to be, or we're talking about you're suddenly questioning like your postseason to an extent. Another comment from Micah. When you can build around J-Hub and get a really good big plus another squirrel, he'll be back. Yeah, look, if you get that as your starting point, you got a shot. They got to get the defense figured out, though. That's another thing. I don't know when you got in here, Mike. I kind of ran through some of the spots I was looking at. Just they need a veteran center. I think you need a guy at the 4, who I would say a defense first type guy there. But I want a center who can be like a complete center. Like, give me a guy who can be both a scoring threat and a rim protector. Give me defense at the 4. I want a 3-and-D guy at wing. And I think they've got pretty good scoring in the backcourt at this point. A guy who can play, like, truly defend out at the point, I think would be a big deal. So, I mean, I'm prioritizing defense over everything else in the portal, but they definitely need to hit on a few of those guys. Big time players. From a baseball standpoint, again, though, you got to go win this series in Columbia. If you don't, you're in real trouble. I mean, really, you need a sweep to get back on track after getting swept the last 2 weekends at home. But even if you take 2 out of 3, it's like, okay, that's some momentum to build off of, and then you go into the LSU series, see what happens. Quincy did not cut it last year. He's not aggressive enough. Yeah, Ballard is disappointing. Of the transfer State has brought in that ended up playing major roles, Quincy Ballard is the most disappointing. He can't be on the Andrew Taylor, Kanye Clary tier of guys who you brought in that just literally did nothing. Jamel Horton was that the first year for Jans, the guy who came in that you expected to play a role that did literally nothing. He just didn't play. Ballard, I remember when State got him, it was, okay, they've got a dude who's going to fit what they want to do perfectly. It didn't work out. We need a sweep plus a run rule, not going to lie. Honestly, from a momentum standpoint, that'd be great. But they just need something going back in the right direction. So hopefully we can talk about some positive stuff for baseball after this weekend, but we'll see how it works out for them. That'll do it for it. I can't even talk at this point. I'm scramble-brained right now. That's going to do it for me. Appreciate those of you who tuned in. Shout out to Micah in the chat for jumping in with some great conversation there. Just a lot of thoughts on basketball that I wanted to get into. I know, again, we typically talk football mostly on this show, but basketball portal and just sort of the expectations for next year were very heavy on the mind. It's something I've been wanting to find the right episode to talk about, and this was a good chance to. I'll be back Monday. Probably some more spring football type thoughts. I'm not going to promise anything just yet, but I've got some ideas for that. Monday, 6 p.m., you can catch me here on the channel. And, of course, then we'll be back a week from now with another call-in show. Appreciate everybody for listening. If you haven't already, please leave us a like. Subscribe to the channel and have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And as always, swing your sword. Hail State.
Hey, y'all. This is Grant Sassery of LSU at the Voice of College Football Network. I'm here today to announce that the Voice of College Football Network now has its official website. It's been uploaded so you can look at all the latest news and content from the Voice of College Football Network. You can also look at different forums, channels, shows, and it has to show all the show schedules right here and the host. Make sure to check out the Voice of College Football's new website at vocfb.com. Once again, vocfb.com.